Hi guys, it's Dan from Dan's Best Tech. I finally got my hands on the hottest laptop on the market right now, my 2020 13-inch Macbook Air with the new quad-core 10th Gen Core i7 CPU. In this video, I give my thorough review of the laptop. Is it worth the asking price? And how does it compare to the previously released Macbooks? And do I think it's capable of gaming and running Final Cut Pro? Stay tuned for more. If you're a Pro user, wait for the 2020 MacBook Pro. So I really wanted to try and recommend the Core i5 and i7 2020 MacBook Airs for someone like me who uses Final Cut Pro and plays games on Steam. But when I turned the laptop on for the first time and started downloading some games, my CPU temperatures immediately jumped up to 100 degrees C. And that scared me, because baby, it's hot, hot, hot. If you'd like me to stop singing in future videos, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Anyways, so then I reached out to the most popular and inspirational tech YouTubers to see what they were saying about it. After watching many reviews, I summed up their results in this quick, comprehensive summary, which in retrospect matches pretty closely to my recommendations. Firstly, we all hope that you are staying home and staying safe. But Jonathan Morrison did one of the best intros by giving a shout out to Trevor Noah, who showcased a charity for helping children who aren't currently going to school and who rely on school lunches. I agree that this is a great idea, so I left a link to the charity down in the description as well. In summary, all reviewers recommend this laptop for people who prefer macOS and only do basic tasks like browsing the web, taking notes, and watching videos. Luke Miani, Ali Abdal, Macworld, and Andrew from Apple Insider all mention that the entry-level $1,000 dual-core i3 base model's better performance, speakers, microphone, keyboard, and doubles storage all make the 2020 MacBook Air great and worth the sacrifices in battery life. Dave Lee makes the point that the entry-level i3 version is the best valued MacBook in a long time and that it feels identical to the i5 model during the basic tasks mentioned before. And the tech chap adds that the Core i3 is great as long as you aren't doing any intensive tasks. For future-proofing, The Verge, Carl Conrad, Brandon Butch, and the Tech Bros all recommend that you pay the extra $100 to upgrade to the Core i5 quad-core processor. Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, 9to5Mac, and Max Tech all say that although not designed for it, you can push the 2020 MacBook Air to run some professional apps like programming, photo editing, and video editing, but they definitely recommend that you upgrade to the Core i5 and potentially 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you should expect high temperatures and expect to wait. And to finish off the summary, Max Tech adds that the lack of proper cooling and thermals keep this laptop from being great for us pro users, while Jonathan Morrison adds that the 720p webcam is very outdated, especially at times like these when everyone is working from home. Let me know in the comments if you thought this very fast list of bullet points summarizing the top tech influencers on YouTube was helpful. Now, back to my review. Let's start by discussing the different configuration options. Apple is trying to sell you on the Core i3 $1,000 model. In my initial impressions video, I said that a dual-core CPU isn't very future-proof, so I didn't recommend it. And for people like me, I still don't. Most other Ultrabooks these days are shipping with quad-core CPUs. The Dell XPS 13, for example, is shipping with the properly cooled quad-core Intel Core i7 1065G7, so I have a hard time trying to recommend someone to buy a new Ultrabook with a dual-core CPU at this time. If you're willing to accept the sacrifice in screen quality, you're better off just getting a 2015 or 2017 MacBook Air with its dual-core processor. But if you're a casual guy who needs to buy something new with macOS, then go ahead and get the future-proof quad-core i5 version for $1,100. Now for the new keyboard and its traditional scissor switch keys. Apple is calling it their new Magic Keyboard, first introduced in the 16-inch MacBook Pro last year, but really it's just a traditional laptop scissor-style keyboard that everyone loves. It delivers 1mm of key travel versus the 0.6 to 0.8 millimeters of key travel in the previous flawed butterfly keyboards, but it isn't as much key travel as the 1.4 millimeters of key travel in the 2015 MacBook Airs and Pros. That said, I'm happy to say that the keys on the 2020 MacBook Air feel great. You'll get used to the travel distance after only a few minutes, where I could never get used to the travel distance on the butterfly switches in previous MacBooks. They are quieter for when you're taking notes in the office or in class, and you don't have to worry about their longevity. They won't break from a piece of dust. The trackpad is larger than the 2015 and 2017 MacBook Airs and smaller than the 2017 and 2018 13-inch MacBook Pros. It is just as nice as all Apple trackpads. It is way better than any Windows or Chrome OS computer. The glass feels very nice under my fingers, and Force Touch works perfectly. The physical function keys are very appreciated too. The keys are easy to use without having to look down at the keyboard. I prefer my muscle memory telling me exactly where each key is without me having to look down. And to top it off, we still get a fingerprint sensor for quick logins and security. As far as ports, the 2020 MacBook Air only comes with 2 full-speed Thunderbolt 3 ports and a 3.5mm headphone jack. Won't you take me to Dongle Town? But yeah, I will always miss having USB Type-A ports and an SD card slot. For me, USB Type-A ports are helpful for the occasional wired mouse or external hard drive, and the SD card slot is great for transferring videos and pictures. But comment if you still require these types of ports for your applications, or let me know if you think Apple is finally correct and that they are outdated. The sound on the 2020 MacBook Air is improved as well. Apple introduced noise cancellation technology that lets the laptop have deeper bass without rattling the internal components. Therefore, the upward-facing speakers sound great for such a thin laptop. All this said, if you really want the best quality in sound, use external speakers or headphones. Moving to the display, the 13.3-inch True Tone screen was left unchanged from last year. Although the 386 nits 16:10 display is nice, and the 2560x1600 resolution is very sharp, the large bezels around the screen aren't really innovative in 2020. I mean, look at this side by side to the Dell XPS 13 laptop. It feels like Apple is just taking the displays from their 8-year-old 2012 Retina MacBook Pro and using it here in the MacBook Air. Regarding the battery life, Apple is pretty honest on their website as to what you will get. Last year's dual-core MacBook Air was benchmarked at 12 hours, but this year's quad-core version is only benchmarked to get you 11. I'm not a big fan of the decrease, but this battery life will still get you through the entire day. That said, my 2015 MacBook Air is rated for 14 hours. Regarding the weight, it increased from 2.75 to 2.8 pounds. I would prefer something a little closer to the 2015 11-inch MacBook Air's 2.2 pound weight, or the 2015 MacBook's 2.0 pound weight. I don't understand why the 2020 MacBook Air weighs 2.8 pounds when all Apple had to do was put a higher quality 13-inch bezel-less display inside their 11-inch MacBook Air's chassis. And I loved the 2-pound 12-inch MacBook from 2015. Sure, it was slow, fanless, and had a flawed butterfly keyboard, but it was super light and portable. In 2020, 2.8 pounds isn't that light anymore. It's almost as heavy as the 2019 13-inch MacBook Pro. Adding fuel to the fire, the 14-inch Asus ExpertBook B9 weighs 1.9 pounds, the 14-inch Asus Swift 7 weighs 2 pounds, the 13-inch Samsung Galaxy Book S weighs 2.1 pounds, and the 15-inch LG Gram weighs 2.4 pounds. I mean, the 2019 Razer Blade Stealth only weighs 3.3 pounds, and that has a properly cooled GTX 1650 Max-Q GPU inside and almost 5 times the graphical performance. I know 2.8 pounds isn't heavy at all, but Apple's 2008 MacBook Air, released 12 years ago, only weighed 3.0 pounds. I'm just asking, where's the innovation? Now let's finally discuss the CPU. My 2020 MacBook Air includes the Core i7 1060NG7 CPU with the Intel Iris Plus integrated graphics. This is the 10th gen Intel quad-core processor with a base clock speed of 1.2 GHz and a turbo boost speed of 3.8 GHz. This is the first time Apple has included a quad-core processor in its MacBook Airs. So is the i7 worth it over the i3 and i5? Check out this comparison table. My i7 barely scores higher than the i5 version, and the graphics perform exactly the same. Additionally, I want to make a note that the Core i7's multi-core score drops from 3600 to 3000 if I let the test run consecutively when the CPU is already at 100 degrees. I think this is why there is such a large inconsistency in scores at Geekbench. So yeah, I would say that there's not much of a reason to upgrade to the i7 version. And as I said before, if you want a future-proof laptop, spend the extra $100 for the quad-core i5 variant. If you compare the 2020 MacBook Air to my MacBook Air and Pro from 2015, the 2020 MacBook Air starts to shine a bit. The 2020 MacBook Air is definitely more powerful than my 2015 MacBook Air, but it is close but not quite good enough yet to replace my 2015 MacBook Pro. Additionally, both my 2015 MacBooks have arguably better port selection with their USB Type-A ports and SD card slots, are much cheaper, and have upgradable storage. And I know what you're thinking. Just get a 16-inch MacBook Pro for power. And you'd be right. But the 16-inch MacBook Pro is much heavier and too expensive for me. What about Windows? Can you live with subpar trackpads and unreliable battery life? Then the Dell XPS 13, Razer Blade Stealth, and MSI Prestige 14 are great alternatives. The 2019 Razer Blade Stealth with a GTX 1650 Max-Q only weighs slightly more than the MacBook Air, is available for around the same price, has better port selection, has replaceable storage, and has almost 4 times the graphical performance. So who is this laptop for? Apple is saying that most people who buy the MacBook Air will stick to Apple's software suite and won't push it. Simply put, downloading Steam games, running Chrome, and editing videos are not things that Apple wants you to do with this MacBook Air on a regular basis. As long as you stick to browsing the web, checking emails, and taking notes, the temperatures will stay in the 40s and 50s. But let's push Apple's real-world scenario to the limit. Here, I am showing you a high-resolution video playing back on YouTube, and is playing back just fine. Oh, by the way, I also have 42 tabs open in Safari. The temperatures are a little warm in the 60s, but they aren't that high yet. As you can see, my previous video plays just fine, but enough of the selfless promotion. Oh, I also have Apple TV playing videos just fine as well. The temperatures do rise into the 70s, but that's 2 videos playing back at once with 42 open tabs in Safari. Look, I even have Steam open. Even though the temperatures are now in the 80s, scrolling is still smooth and it feels just as snappy as usual. And oh my, look, I'm also editing some 4K 30 FPS video in Final Cut Pro. Even though the temperature is now in the upper 90s, scrolling through the video is still smooth and working just fine. Did I mention that I still have all other apps open, the YouTube videos are still playing, dozens of tabs are open in Safari, and I have no slowdown when trying to start my YouTube video again. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Is the 2020 MacBook Air enough for the typical user? So yeah, I'm going to go against the grain and say that you can use the 2020 MacBook Air to edit 4K 30 FPS video. I know many reviewers say that the MacBook Air is not meant for it, that it heats up too quickly and export times are unbearable, but I'm a rebel. What I really care about is choppy playback while I'm editing. The good news is that I'm not seeing any of this, and the temperatures never really climbs above 80 degrees when I'm just editing in Final Cut Pro. Maybe it's because I always edit videos off of the internal SSD and I don't apply many effects and filters. When I'm exporting though, the temperature does jump up to 100 degrees, but that also happens on my 2015 MacBook Pro. That said, the export times do take a little bit longer. A 4K export that took 9 minutes on my 2015 MacBook Pro took 14 minutes on my 2020 MacBook Air. As I said, I don't really use that many effects and filters, but I'm not complaining with smooth editing and a 14-minute export. Hi guys, it's Future Dan here. I just wanted to give an update as I was trying to use my 2020 MacBook Air to edit this 4K video, and it would work fine for the first 15 minutes. The temperature was fine, the CPU utilization was fine, the GPU utilization was fine, everything was fine, but all of a sudden after 15 minutes it would just start to freeze up and I'd have to restart Final Cut Pro to get it working again. And once it was up and running again, it would work again for another 10-15 minutes, and then all of a sudden it would stop working again. So I just gave up and I moved the entire edit over to my 2015 MacBook Pro, and everything's working fine now. So let me know what you guys think. I am stumped. I have no idea what's causing this. And back to the future video. What about gaming? Are people in the comments going to tell me that MacBook Airs are not meant for it? I set out to play 4 different Steam games: Tomb Raider, CSGO, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Elder Scrolls Online. Tomb Raider at lowest settings at 720p ran at 77 FPS and only dropped to 59 FPS, and it had no stutter. So I would say that this older title is very playable. CSGO also runs just fine at its lowest 720p settings. But once you get to newer games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you're not going to have a good time. It got an average of 20 FPS at 720p lowest settings, so no, I don't think this newer game is playable. And even though Elder Scrolls Online can run at 60 FPS at 720p with the lowest settings, which looks like garbage by the way, there are still stutters every few seconds which takes me out of the experience. Also, I want to note that all of these games took a long time to load, like 5 minutes long. Like I thought the games had frozen, but I decided to let it go. That said, Apple is trying to push Apple Arcade, and these mobile games run just fine. Sure, the temperatures cling to 100 degrees, and it'll cost you $5 a month, but it is possible. So just like my 2015 MacBook Air review, this 2020 MacBook Air is not meant for gaming. But you can run some Apple Arcade games and some older Steam titles as long as you aren't expecting anything better than low settings at 720p. So now let's finally talk about heat and performance. Unigine Heaven with everything maxed out at 1080p showed an FPS at 6.7 and a score of 168. When running these tests, the MacBook Air shoots up in temperature really quickly and it drops its frequency from 3.8 GHz turbo boost to around 1.7. And just to be clear, these 100-degree temperatures are fine according to Apple and Intel. They are choosing to let your laptop run at 100 degrees. The laptop isn't technically overheating and shutting down, but to keep the temperatures from climbing higher, Apple drops the CPU frequency and voltage, which in turn hurts performance. When I set my 2020 MacBook Air on an ice pack, similar to the amazingly thorough testing at Max Tech, the Unigine Heaven FPS and scores increased to 8.0 and 202 respectively. So yeah, you can use this MacBook Air to do more intensive tasks if you want to, but the cooling could definitely be improved. As I said before, I get 100-degree temperatures just by downloading a few games in Steam. The good news is that when the fan is running, it isn't super loud or whiny. Do you think Apple purposefully didn't add a heat pipe between the fan and heatsink to keep the laptop's performance lower than the 2019 MacBook Pro? Do you think that after Apple releases a 2020 MacBook Pro with a better performance, then Apple will add the heat pipe to the 2021 MacBook Air and claim another performance increase with just a simple tweak to their cooling? In conclusion, if you need a MacBook today for light tasks, you prefer Mac OS, you want one of the best valued MacBooks, one that has a 10th gen processor, one with an improved GPU performance, and an improved keyboard that doesn't break from a single piece of dust, while still maintaining the things that make MacBooks great like the trackpad, True Tone display, and Touch ID, then the 2020 MacBook Air is for you. That said, it's still over $1,000, it runs hot in some pro apps, it has a limited port selection, it weighs more than previous MacBooks and many Windows alternatives, and it has a worse battery life than last year's MacBook Air. But what do you guys think? For me, a pro user who works outside of Apple's default app suite should use a MacBook Pro. The drop in performance and sustained 100-degree temps when all I'm doing is downloading a game in Steam makes me nervous about the longevity of this laptop for pro users. Even though Intel and Apple say it's fine, in my experience, hotter running laptops don't last as long as better cooled ones. So I don't think I could recommend this laptop for someone like me who uses Steam and Final Cut Pro on a regular basis. For simply taking notes, reading emails, and browsing the web, go for it. I'm personally holding out for the 2020 13 or 14-inch MacBook Pro with superior performance and cooling. If you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and I'll catch you in the next one.